beneath the blood-red sands of Red Mesa, where screams dissolve into wind, Clara Duvall, a young teacher with dreams of justice, lay abandoned, a bullet through her shoulder, left to die by those she trusted. Amid the ashes, an Apache scout named Kaya, scarred by betrayal, saw her fading breath and chose to save her. Their story weaves through fire, stone, and silent promises, leading to a choice that defies the frontier's cruelty. Will their bond heal old wounds or burn in the desert's wrath? Subscribe now, share where you're listening from, and uncover how two hearts carved hope from dust. Stay until the end. Secrets whisper in the canyon's echo. The wind howled through Red Mesa, kicking up clouds of crimson dust that stung like buckshot. The sun hung high, a merciless eye scorching the earth, turning every rock into a branding iron. Clara Duvall staggered through the wreckage of her wagon train, her boots crunching over splintered wood and smoldering canvas. Blood seeped from her shoulder, warm and sticky, soaking her cotton blouse. Each step sent a jolt of pain through her, sharp as a rattler's bite. Around her, the air reeked of gunpowder and charred flesh. The settlers' screams still echoed in her ears, though the desert had swallowed their bodies. Elias Crewley's gang had come at dawn, their horses thundering like a storm across the plain. They didn't just rob, they slaughtered, leaving only Clara alive to bear witness. She'd stood up to Crowley, a wiry man with eyes like chipped flint. His gang had been carving a bloody path through Apache lands, stealing grazing grounds for profit. Clara, a teacher from Boston with ink-stained fingers and a stubborn streak, had called him out in front of the settlers. "Murderer?" she'd spat, her voice steady despite the rifles aimed at her chest. "You kill for land. That isn't yours." Crowley's laugh was cold, like the clink of spurs on stone. "Preach all you want, schoolmarm," he'd said, drawing his revolver. The shot tore through her shoulder before she could blink, the force knocking her to the dirt. She'd gasped, clutching the wound, as Crowley's men looted the wagons, their boots kicking up ash. "Leave her," Crowley ordered, his voice flat as the horizon. "Let the desert finish the sermon." The settlers, faces pale with fear, didn't argue. They'd seen what happened to those who crossed him. One man, a farmer with trembling hands, muttered, "She's done for anyway." Another spat into the sand, avoiding her eyes. Clara tried to speak, to beg, but blood filled her mouth, and her words came out as a gurgle. The wagons creaked as they rolled away, wheels grinding over the bones of the dead. Hooves faded into the distance, leaving only the whine of the wind and the distant screech of vultures circling overhead. Clara lay sprawled in the dirt, her vision swimming. The ground was hot against her cheek, gritty with ash. Her fingers clawed weakly at the sand, as if she could dig her way out of death. The pain in her shoulder throbbed, a relentless drumbeat. But worse was the betrayal. She'd come to Red Mesa to teach, to bring words and hope to a lawless land. Instead, she'd found men who'd rather bury her than listen. Her breath came in shallow rasps, each one weaker than the last. The sky above was vast, indifferent, its blue fading to gray as her eyes fluttered. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time blurred in the heat. The sun dipped lower, painting the mesa in shades of fire. Clara's thoughts fragmented, memories of chalkboards and children's laughter mixing with the burn of her wound. She didn't hear the hooves at first, soft and deliberate, unlike the chaos of Crowley's men. A shadow fell across her, sharp against the dying light. She forced her eyes open, squinting through the haze. A man crouched beside her, his silhouette framed by the sun. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, and his skin was weathered, like leather left too long in the desert. His eyes, deep and unreadable, studied her not with pity, but with the calm of a hunter reading tracks. He was Apache, she realized, her heart lurching. Stories of savages flashed through her mind, tales spun by settlers to justify their fear. She tried to move, to crawl away, but her body refused, limp as a cut rope. The man didn't speak. He tilted a cactus husk to her lips, letting warm, bitter water trickle into her mouth. She choked, coughed, but swallowed the liquid, sparking a faint pulse of life. "You're still breathing," he said, his voice low, accented, like stones rolling in a riverbed. "That's all that matters." His name, she'd later learn, was Kaya. Without another word, he lifted her, his arms steady but not gentle, as if carrying a wounded animal. Clara's head lolled against his chest, the rhythm of his horse's gait lulling her into a haze. The world blurred, red cliffs, twisted mesquite, the faint cry of a hawk. She faded in and out, catching glimpses of a canyon rising around them, its walls etched with shadows. Kaya rode on, his silence heavier than the heat. Clara didn't know why he'd saved her, or what he wanted. All she knew was the blood drying on her skin and the strange, stubborn spark that kept her heart beating. Clara's heart clung to that stubborn spark as Kaya carried her through the dusk, the canyon walls rising like silent sentinels around them. The air grew cooler, heavy with the scent of sage and stone, as the world slipped into shadow. The cave was no cave at all, but a hollowed-out scar in the cliff face, its walls etched with faint scratches, hands, birds, suns, marks of a people long scattered. Kaya laid Clara on a bed of woven grass, the fibers rough but clean. Her shoulder burned, the pain a dull roar. But she was alive, her breath a faint rebellion against the desert's verdict. Kaya knelt by a small fire, its glow flickering over his face, sharp and unyielding as the mesa itself. He worked in silence, tearing strips of deer hide, soaking them in a paste of crushed herbs that smelled of earth and bitterness. Clara watched, her vision wavering, as he bound her wound with steady hands, his fingers calloused but precise, like a man who'd stitched life back together before. She tried to speak, to ask his name, but her throat was raw, her voice a cracked whisper. "Savage," she rasped, the words slipping out before she could stop it, born of fear and stories told by firelight in Boston parlors. Kaya's hands paused, his eyes flicking to hers, not angry, but measuring, like a hawk sighting movement in the brush. He said nothing, just tipped a gourd of water to her lips again. The liquid was warm, gritty, but it steadied her pulse. "You're still breathing," he repeated, his voice low, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too many stop. He turned back to the fire, leaving her words to hang in the air, unanswered. Night fell, and rain came, a rare patter against the stone. Clara woke to its rhythm, her body aching, but anchored. The fire was low, embers pulsing like a heartbeat. Kaya sat across from her, sharpening a knife against a whetstone, the scrape steady as a metronome. She studied the carvings on the walls, spirals, figures, a handprint pressed into the rock like a vow. "What are they?" she asked, her voice stronger now. Kaya's eyes followed hers to the marks. "Names," he said, "of those the army forgot." His words were clipped, not bitter, but final, like a door closing. Clara's stomach twisted. She'd read of massacres, of villages burned, but they were just words on a page. Here, in this half-ruined shelter, they were real, carved into stone. Days blurred into a rhythm of survival. Kaya brought her broth, bitter with roots but warm, and checked her wound with a scout's efficiency. Clara, too weak to walk far, began to notice the small things. How he placed the gourd within her reach, how he turned his back when she changed the bandages, giving her the dignity of privacy. But trust was a fragile thing. She flinched when he moved too fast, her hand twitching as if to fend off a blow. He noticed, always, and slowed his steps, his silence louder than words. One morning, as the sun clawed its way over the canyon rim, Clara dragged herself to the cave's mouth. Her shoulder screamed, but she needed air, needed to feel something beyond pain. Kaya was gone, out hunting or scouting. She didn't know. She found a charred stick and, on impulse, scratched words into a flat stone. Rain. Fire. Life. The act grounded her, a tether to the schoolroom she'd left behind. When Kaya returned, a jackrabbit slung over his shoulder, he stopped, staring at her words. He crouched, picked up a dagger, and carved the letters deeper, his brow furrowed in concentration. Rain, he said, testing the word, his tongue heavy but deliberate. Clara's breath caught. He wasn't just mimicking, he was learning, reaching across the chasm between them. That night, by the fire, she pointed to the stars. Sky, she said. He repeated it, slow, his eyes tracing the constellations. She didn't know why he kept her here, why he fed her, tended her. Was it pity? Duty? Something else? But as he handed her a piece of dried meat, his fingers brushing hers for a moment, she felt a shift, like a stone settling into place. Their worlds were different, but their hands had touched the same dirt. If this tale of survival and silent bridges speaks to you, subscribe to hear more stories of the frontier, where hearts carve paths through stone. Share where you're listening from. Let's see how far Red Mesa's echo travels. Clara didn't yet understand Kaya, but she saw him, really saw him, for the first time. And in that seeing, something began to grow, fragile as a seedling in the desert's cracks. Something stirred in the desert's cracks, fragile but persistent, like a root-splitting stone. Clara felt it in the quiet moments, when the fire's glow softened Kaya's sharp edges, and their shared words, rain, sky, became a bridge over the chasm of mistrust. Dawn broke over Red Mesa, painting the canyon in streaks of gold and rust. Clara's shoulder still ached, but she could stand now, her steps steadier on the rocky floor. She traced her fingers over the stone where Kaya had carved her words. Rain, fire, life. Each letter a testament to their tentative alliance. Outside, the air was sharp, carrying the tang of mesquite and distant rain. Kaya was already up, his silhouette moving against the horizon, tracking something in the dust. Clara watched him, noting the way he read the earth like a book, his eyes catching signs she couldn't see. Bent grass, a scuff in the dirt. He was a scout, she reminded herself, trained to find what others missed. That morning, she followed him to a narrow stream, its water glinting like quicksilver under the rising sun. Kaya knelt, filling a gourd, but his gaze flicked to the bank, where a single coyote print marked the mud. Not alone, he said, his English halting but clear. Clara's pulse quickened. She scanned the horizon, half expecting Crowley's men to emerge from the haze. Kaya shook his head, pointing to the print. Coyote. Watches, doesn't hunt. His words were sparse, but they carried weight, a lesson in reading the land's secrets. Clara nodded, storing the knowledge like a pebble in her pocket. Back at the cave, tension lingered. Clara's fear of Kaya had faded, but a new unease took its place. Why did he keep her here? She wasn't bound, but she wasn't free either, tethered by her wound and the vast, unforgiving desert. One evening, as the fire crackled low, she spoke without thinking. Indian dog, she muttered, frustration spilling out when Kaya corrected her clumsy attempt at an Apache word for water. His face stilled, the air between them turning brittle. He rose and walked into the night, his shadow swallowed by the canyon's dark mouth. Clara's stomach sank. She hadn't meant it, not really. But the word had slipped, sharp as a blade. She couldn't sleep. The fire's embers mocked her, their glow dimming as guilt gnawed. At midnight, driven by a need to make amends, she limped out of the cave, her shoulder protesting with every step. The canyon was silent, save for the whisper of wind through sagebrush. She found a clearing, a patch of earth marked by a wooden stake, its surface weathered but carved with words. She sleep now. Sky keep her. Kaya's mother, Clara realized, her breath catching. The misspelling stung, a clumsy attempt at English by someone who'd lost everything. She knelt, her fingers trembling, and picked up a piece of charcoal. Carefully, she corrected the inscription. She sleeps now. The sky keeps her. The act felt like a prayer, a way to honor a woman she'd never known. When Kaya returned at dawn, his eyes found the corrected words. He froze, his hand hovering over the stake, as if touching it might unravel the moment. "Now she can rest," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara met his gaze, her throat tight. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not just for the insult, but for the weight of their world's divide." Kaya nodded once, a gesture that felt like absolution. From that day, their language grew. Clara taught him wind and stone, pointing to the canyon's curves as she spoke. Kaya showed her how to listen for the hum of a rattlesnake, how to spot a hawk's shadow before it struck. One afternoon, he handed her a flat stone and a blade, urging her to carve. She etched hope, the word jagged but clear. Kaya studied it, then carved a symbol beside it, a bird with a broken wing. "This," he said, pointing to the bird, then to her. "You." Clara's chest tightened. He wasn't mocking her weakness, he was naming it, giving it shape. By firelight, Kaya began to draw more, his knife scratching stories into stone. 2 birds, one grounded, one hovering low. "They fly together," he said, his voice rough but certain. "Or not at all." Clara stared at the drawing, her fingers brushing the stone. She didn't know what bound them, pity, duty, or something deeper. But in that moment, she felt seen, not as a schoolteacher or a victim, but as someone who could still carve her name into the world. Clara's fingers lingered on the stone, tracing the carved birds, one broken, one steadfast, feeling the weight of being seen in a land that buried so many. In that quiet moment, Red Mesa held its breath, as if the canyon itself sensed the storm gathering on the horizon. The sun rose slow and blood-red, casting long shadows across the canyon's jagged edges. Clara woke to the sound of hooves, faint but growing, like a drumbeat rolling over the mesa. Kaya was already at the cave's mouth, his silhouette taut, a bow slung across his back. His eyes scanned the distance, narrowing as dust clouds bloomed against the dawn. "They're coming," he said, his voice low, like gravel underfoot. Clara's stomach tightened. She knew who it was before he spoke the name. Elias Crowley. Kaya had heard whispers from passing traders. Crowley, now cloaked in the authority of an army officer, was scouring Red Mesa for copper, his greed dressed in a uniform. The land, sacred to Kaya's people, held the bones of his ancestors beneath its red dust. Clara saw the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers flexed around his knife. "They'll burn it all," he said, not looking at her. "Like they burned my village." Clara stepped beside him, her shoulders stiff but healing. "We stop them," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Kaya's eyes met hers, searching, then nodded once, a pact sealed without words. They moved fast. Kaya led her through the canyon's twists, his steps silent as a shadow. He showed her how to pile dry brush at choke points, how to angle rocks to amplify echoes. "Smoke and sound," he said, his English clipped but clear. "They'll think we're many." Clara nodded, her hands trembling as she helped, her mind racing with the weight of what was coming. She wasn't a fighter. Her hands were made for chalk, not guns. But Red Mesa had changed her, hardened her, like iron in a forge. By nightfall, they were ready. Kaya etched a final drawing on a flat stone. 2 birds, wings spread, facing a ring of fire. He pointed to it, then to the canyon's heart. "Here," he said. "We hold here." Clara swallowed, her throat dry as the desert air. She clutched the revolver Kaya had given her, an old army piece he'd scavenged from a trader. Its weight felt foreign, cold against her palm, but she gripped it tight, her resolve sharper than fear. Dawn broke, and Crowley's men came, 6 riders in a haze of dust, their rifles glinting like fangs. Crowley led them, his officer's coat stark against the red earth, his sneer unchanged. "Schoolmarm," he called, spotting Clara at the canyon's mouth. "Guess hell wasn't hot enough." She stood firm, the revolver hidden behind her back. "This land's buried enough of us," she said, her voice cutting through the wind. "It won't bury more." Crowley laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and raised his hand to signal his men. Kaya struck first. He lit the brush piles, sending thick smoke curling through the canyon. The echoes of his whoops bounced off the walls, sounding like a dozen warriors. The soldiers hesitated, their horses rearing as the smoke stung their eyes. Clara's heart pounded, but she moved with Kaya, darting between rocks, firing shots into the air to deepen the chaos. One soldier fell, his horse bolting. Another cursed, swinging his rifle blindly. Crowley's voice roared over the din. "It's a trick, you fools!" Then it went wrong. Crowley spotted Kaya through the smoke, his revolver flashing. The shot cracked, and Kaya staggered, blood blooming across his chest. Clara screamed his name, her voice raw as she fired back. Her bullet caught Crowley in the shoulder, then another in his chest. He crumpled, his eyes wide with shock, the sand drinking his blood. Clara ran to Kaya, dropping the gun, her hands shaking as she pressed them to his wound. "Stay," she begged, her voice breaking. "Stay!" Kaya's eyes found hers, hazy but calm. He coughed, blood flecking his lips, and managed a faint smile. "When you bury me," he whispered, "give me back to the dust that knew her." His hand brushed hers, then fell limp. Clara's sobs echoed through the canyon, louder than the fading hoofbeats of Crowley's fleeing men. She held him until the sun climbed higher, the smoke clearing to reveal a battlefield of ash and silence. Red Mesa had claimed its price, and Clara's heart paid it in full. Red Mesa stood silent, its canyon swallowing the echoes of Clara's sobs as she held Kaya's lifeless body, the dust claiming him as it had his mother. She buried him beneath a scorched pine, scattering his pouch of sacred sand over the grave, her hands carving into stone. He saw me breathing when the world called me dead. The sun beat down on Red Mesa, relentless as ever, but Clara moved through its heat with a new weight in her steps. She returned to the cave, her shoulder stiff but no longer bleeding, her heart a raw wound that refused to close. The carvings on the walls, birds, hands, suns, seemed to watch her, their lines sharper in the slanting light. She packed what little she had, a gourd, a knife, the stone with Kaya's birds. She wasn't running, not anymore. The desert had burned away that instinct, leaving something harder, like flint struck to spark. Weeks passed, and Clara lingered in the canyon, living off what Kaya had taught her, how to find water in cactus, how to read the wind's warnings. One dusk, as she knelt by his grave, hoofbeats broke the silence. She tensed, her hand gripping the revolver, but it wasn't Crowley's men. A patrol of soldiers appeared, their uniforms dusty, their faces wary. "Ma'am," their leader called, a young lieutenant with a sunburned nose. "You alone out here?" Clara stood, her hair wild, a bone necklace Kaya had made glinting at her throat. "No," she said, her voice steady as the mesa itself. "The land remembers." The lieutenant frowned, confused, but saw the steel in her eyes. He tipped his hat and rode off, leaving her to the silence. That night, Clara made a choice. She found Crowley's satchel, abandoned in the skirmish, its papers spilling like dry leaves. Among them was the land deed, stamped with the Army's seal, claiming Red Mesa for copper. She carried it to Kaya's grave, struck a match, and watched the paper curl into ash. The flames danced, their light catching the carved birds on the stone. "They left me for dead once," she whispered, the wind carrying her words. "You saw me breathing. Now I see others breathing where the world sees none." The ashes scattered, blending with the red sand, a vow sealed in fire. By spring of 1879, Red Mesa had changed. Clara built a school, not of brick, but of adobe and salvaged wood, its walls rising where the canyon met the plain. She taught children, Apache, settler, mestizo, gathering them in a circle under the open sky. They scratched letters on slates, their laughter sharp against the desert's quiet. On her desk sat the stone with Kaya's birds, its broken wing a reminder of what she'd survived. One boy, his hair braided like Kaya's, pointed to it. "Miss Duvall, why's the wing broken?" Clara's eyes drifted to the horizon, where the mesa burned gold in the dawn. "Because that's how it learned to fly together," she said, her voice low but firm. The children learned fast, their voices weaving English and Apache into a new rhythm. Clara taught them to read the land, too, how to spot a coyote's track, how to listen for rain. She wore the bone necklace always, its weight a tether to Kaya's memory. Sometimes at dusk, she'd catch a glimpse of a hawk circling above, its shadow tracing the canyon's edge, and she'd feel him near, not gone, but woven into the earth. One evening, as the children left, Clara walked to the canyon's heart, where a new carving adorned a flat rock. She'd added to Kaya's birds, 2 figures, one pale, one dark, standing before a ring of fire. Their hands reached toward the flame, not touching but close, a promise kept in stone. She traced the lines, her fingers steady. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of sage and ash, and Clara felt the mesa breathe with her. Red Mesa was no longer just a graveyard. It was a place where the forgotten were named, where children's voices drowned out the ghosts of gunfire. Clara stood by the school, watching the sun sink, its light catching the carved figures. She didn't need to speak Kaya's name aloud. It lived in every lesson, every mark on the stone. The desert had taken much, but it had given her this, a legacy of breath, of fire, of a love that outlasted the dust. The tale of Clara and Kaya in Red Mesa weaves a legacy of courage, carved in stone and fire. What did their story stir in you? Did the desert's silence or their unspoken bond linger in your thoughts? Share your reflections. Let us know where this journey reached you. We're grateful for your time, for riding through this frontier with us. The mesa's echoes carry on, and we hope you'll join us for the next story, where hearts defy the dust. Until then, keep listening, keep seeing those the world forgets.